Hello, everyone, and welcome to a abridged but also video version of the Full Court Press today. We're off because of some programming, and also it's New Year's Eve. But I figured I'd come into the office early today and give my reactions and some thoughts on the Mountain West, how it went yesterday. Obviously, focusing on the Utah State game, and I'm also having fun experimenting with some new formats for our content here at 106.9 The Fan and Cache Valley Daily. If there's an appetite for some morning after Mountain West reactions, I can do these a little more often. I don't want to completely infringe on Tom Moser's territory that he's staked with his live streams that he does night of after these Mountain West basketball games, and you probably should check his stuff out. I didn't manage to catch the live stream last night because I wanted to sleep. I had to get up early this morning, play some pickup ball. But we're going to go over all these games in roughly chronological order. We're going to try and, at least the chronological order I remember. We're going to start with Wyoming, then go to Utah State, then the San Diego State, San Jose game, Nevada, Colorado State, and New Mexico, Boise, which was the nightcap. I didn't get to watch all of these games. Obviously, my main focus was on the Aggies, so we'll linger on that a little bit. I know where my bread is buttered and where most of my followers are. But we'll be going over all of these games and my thoughts. Managed to catch a decent chunk of the Wyoming Air Force game. I had it on a screen while I was writing a bunch of other things. But I kept not noticing what was happening throughout the entire game. So, but I'll give my thoughts there. I was following kind of the game flow of San Diego State and San Jose in the Nevada, Colorado State game. I was able to catch the end of the last 10, 15 minutes of game time for the New Mexico Boise State game. So I saw Boise as they pulled away there. Saw that New Mexico had been controlling the game for a portion, but Boise pulling away to get the victory in the end there. But we'll go over that at the end, as again, that was the nightcap, so that'll cap off this recap here. But to start with Wyoming and Air Force, although actually I should mention, and it's kind of fitting because this first game we're going to go over fits into the theme, but I'll say the theme that you're going to hear me probably go over with all these games is just kind of how ugly this night in the Mountain West, the last night in the Mountain West was, where I was pulling up some stats here. Of the 10 teams that were in action, we had 5 games. Of those 10 teams, only 3 of them shot 43% or better. And to give you context, a team that averages 43% on field goals would rank roughly 300th in the country in field goal percentage. Technically inside, it's like the team that's 293rd in field goal percentage averages about 43%. And I forget who it was. I had the leaderboard pulled up a second ago. So only 3 of the teams, only 2 of those teams won, actually. One of the teams shot better than 43% and lost. 2 of them ended up getting the win. You also had 6 of the teams commit at least 16 turnovers. 5 of them had at least 18. There were a pair of games where both teams committed at least 18 turnovers. Fresno, Utah State, Wyoming Air Force, and then I believe San Diego State, San Jose had both teams with more than 16 turnovers. So it was kind of concentrated into 3 of the 5 games, where there were actually 2 games of relatively clean basketball. You also had some games where there's a lot of fouls called. The end of the New Mexico Boise game was a little frustrating there. Utah State, Fresno State, there were a lot of fouls called in that one, particularly on the Aggies. So a lot of ugly basketball, and I would mostly attribute that to the fact that a lot of these teams weren't playing over the Christmas break. Utah State hadn't played since December 20th. A lot of other teams in a very similar situation. They were off for Christmas. A lot of them went home to see their families, so they weren't practicing. And so this was kind of their first real action in 10 days, plus maybe only a couple of days of practicing beforehand. So they kind of got out of their groove. And so with these teams, having this one ugly game out of the way, for most of them, I think they're going to get back to form. We've got a 6-game slate on Saturday, so I think things are going to go a lot better. But let's actually start, where I said we were going to start, with the Wyoming Air Force game. And Wyoming is an interesting team that I look at, because record-wise, this is a team that you'd think you'd be able to get behind. They are one of, I think, a handful of teams that have 10 wins. So you got 4 teams with 10 wins in the Mountain West. But, you do power rankings in the Mountain West, or you look at where, these teams rank in various metrics, KenPom, the net, where Wyoming just doesn't fit in with the other teams that have 10 wins, because Utah State's 11-1, Nevada's 10-3, New Mexico's 10-3. Like, all of those teams, or at least 2 of those teams, there's some optimism. There's optimism around Utah State, especially, and then Nevada seems to be gaining some momentum, especially after they got that win over Colorado State that we'll get to in a minute. But Wyoming doesn't seem to have that respect with these rankings. And I'm trying to pull them up right now. It's probably why I sound distracted and all that. So Wyoming 97th in KenPom. Nevada's 66th, or the other 10-win team. New Mexico's 70. Utah State's all the way up at 31. And I'm not in the camp of believers for Wyoming either. I think I had my power rankings out, and I think I put them at like 5 or 6 or something like that, maybe even lower, because I'm just not sold on Wyoming yet. And the Grand Canyon game felt like a bit of a, it felt like that kind of confirmed my suspicions that Wyoming wasn't the team I thought they were. They beat at home by 12 points by Grand Canyon, who's not necessarily been a world beater this year. Isn't projected to be one of the contenders right now in the Mountain West. Then Wyoming, they go to Air Force, and it looks like it was going to be more of the same, where they were gearing up for a potentially unimpressive win over Air Force. They controlled this game early. They got out to a lead. They got to a 14-point lead in the first half, led by 10 at halftime. Then that's where things start kind of going wrong, as Air Force went on an early run. They tied the game about midway through the second half, 41 apiece. But then Wyoming takes control at the end. And we see that in a few games last night, where the team that was supposed to win probably let the underdog back into the game in a time that they really shouldn't have, but then they pull away to take the win. We see that in Utah State, Fresno State to a degree, and San Diego State and San Jose. We kind of saw that in there. So Wyoming ends up with a satisfactory margin of victory, but it felt unimpressive in several ways, where you have this game tied up to a team that, with Air Force, they're a team in the 300s in KenPom. This is not a good team. I know it's on the road, and that kind of makes things iffy. Air Force has been weirdly competitive for how bad they've been when they're playing at home. But Wyoming will kind of look back and just see an ugly win, something they're going to go home, not whining about getting a win, but they're not going to be happy with how they played. I think I saw the quote from Sundance Wicks about the 20 turnovers. That's not something to be happy about at all. Really, Wyoming only gets away with this because they forced 19 turnovers from Air Force. So not the greatest performance from the team overall, but you get enough that, you don't see this as a close game where Wyoming escaped. You see this as a game where Wyoming just didn't play up to its potential, or at least what they see as their potential. And for me, with Wyoming, I'm just kind of waiting, and I'm going to see, does Wyoming actually make the move to capitalize on the fact that they have one of the best records in the Mountain West? Are they actually going to live up to that record in a way that kind of defies the preseason expectations that I and others are kind of still holding over them? So we'll see. I mean, Wyoming does have fantastic depth. I think that's something that may show up in some of these games. In this one, they had multiple guys in double figures off the bench, continuing the trend that Wyoming's had, where I think they're in the 99th percentile in the country in bench points per game. I think they're at 40.1 bench points per game. Somehow second in the Mountain West, with San Diego State actually being first. They averaged 40.5 points off the bench. So tremendous depth there from Wyoming, and it obviously pays off in a big way. Naz Meyer obviously still playing well, where he's top of the freshman class in my opinion. There are some other good freshmen, but I think Naz Meyer is really the best. He's leading from the front for Wyoming in a way that really no other freshman in the Mountain West is doing. You have some good contributors, but he is leading from the front for a Wyoming team that is now 10-3. Even if they're not like top 50 or in KenPom and whatnot, very good team. And so I like what I'm seeing from Naz Meyer, and I like the depth. So we'll see if Wyoming manages to kind of overcome some early minor struggles in Mountain West play and put up some bigger wins. So moving on to the Utah State versus Fresno State game. This is the game obviously I follow as the Aggies beat writer and here on 106.9 The Fan. And yeah, this was just another ugly game. The teams combined for 38 turnovers. Utah State had 20 of them. Season high turnovers for them. Tied a season high with 23 fouls committed. You only have 12 assists on 26 made shots. Fresno, played into that as well. Having an ugly game. Coach Calhoun had the quote afterwards where we were on the media Zoom call where we don't have very many Utah State media traveling to the game, and he was like, "I'm glad you guys didn't have to see that in person." It's like, because that was it was kind of an ugly game to witness in person. Because Fresno has 18 turnovers. They commit 20 fouls themselves. So you get 43 whistles in this game. Fresno also shot 34.5%, which I think was a season low or tied a season low in field goal percentage. They shot 22.7% from three. The Aggies shot 25% from three. Heck, most of the Mountain West didn't shoot well from three. I didn't add those numbers up, but a lot of teams shooting poorly from three because, Wyoming, they shot a decent 35%, but Air Force shot single-digit percentage from three. They were 1 for 12, so not a lot of great three-point shooting that we've gone over so far here in our review. But the Aggies did shoot 47.3% from the field. This was something that I was kind of maybe expecting to see, where Fresno State actually has good three-point defense. They've held teams to, I think, 30% from three this season. They might have, with this performance, slipped into holding teams under 30% from three. Let me actually check that here on KenPom because I think they have that. Yeah, they're actually now holding teams to under 30% from three, with holding the Aggies to 25. But Fresno also struggles on interior defense. And so Utah State, they get 40 points in the paint. They shoot 17 of 27 at the rim. They also managed to draw a few fouls. They shot 22 free throws. Some of those were take fouls at the end, like 5 or 6 of those free throws at the end. So they kind of shot 16 free throws before you get to take foul territory. Not absurd, but still a decent number of free throws for the Aggies. So Utah State was able to dominate the interior, and Fresno State wasn't really able to dominate anything. There's 63 points, 63 at home. Not a good, scoring output for Fresno, who's not a bad offensive team. They average about 75 a game overall, but they shot 9 of 21 at the rim. They, and they had a length advantage inside. They had a 7-footer, and the Aggies' tallest guy in the rotation is 6'10", and they were playing 6'8", 6'7" guys at center most of the game. So Fresno State had a length advantage and even a height advantage in the front court, but the Aggies scored more points in the paint, 40-18. They shot better at the rim, and they out-rebounded Fresno. It was like 41-34. So Utah State, in a weird way, I would say, like, they were weirdly impressive in this game because they played bad. Again, shoot 25% from three, commit 20 turnovers, commit 23 personal fouls. But they still found ways to dominate this game, or at least notably outperform. Like, they didn't dominate the boards. They were +7. So notably better, but not crazy out of this world domination on the glass. Fresno State still had 10 offensive boards themselves. But Utah State found a way to basically maintain control of this game and never really lose control of the game, even in a game where they were playing bad. Like last year when Utah State was playing terrible against Fresno State, it was a home game in the Spectrum last year, and Utah State was down by like 20 points. Fresno State outscored them 30-13 in the first 10 minutes of that game. Like Fresno State was absolutely dominating. Now the Aggies dominated the remaining 30 minutes of that game. They won that one by I think it was 5 or 6. So they played terrible, rallied, jumped back. They end up winning that game despite playing terrible. But outside of the first 4 minutes when these teams were exchanging buckets, Fresno State led by 2-0, 4-2, and then 6-4. After Utah State went on a run and they took an 11-6 lead, they controlled the game from that point on. The closest the game got after it was 11-8 with 13:41 to go in the first half. The closest they got after that was 5 points. It was never a one-possession game. In the final, what is that? 28 minutes of the game or 30-something minutes of the game? Yeah, 26 minutes, final 26 minutes of the game. Utah State never allowed it to be less than a two-possession game. They only got it up to as much as 13, which the Aggies were 15-point favorites. So you don't even reach the spread at any point, let alone, beat it at the end. But Utah State maintained control of this game despite how bad they were playing, which is a testament, I think, to their defense. Because if there's one thing that Utah State didn't do badly at this entire game, it was defense. They held Fresno State to 34% shooting, or 35% if you want to round up. They forced 18 turnovers. Utah State's defense was, I guess, except for the fouls. I guess that's kind of the one thing. They fouled too much. But the defense buckled down and did what they had to. And in the final minute, when Fresno State was kind of making their one last push, they got it to within 6 with 55 seconds to go. That's, you got to stop, make a three-pointer, and suddenly you're in range of a surprise win at the end. But Fresno State missed its last 3 shots. Jake Heidbreder missed 3 layups. The Aggies buckled down and forced those missed layups, eventually got the rebounds, and then they make enough free throws. If they'd made all their free throws, they actually would have won this game by 12 or 13 points. But instead, they end up with a 9-point win. So it's the kind of game that is ugly, but you're happy with the win. Coach Calhoun, after certainly pointed out all of the things the Utah State did wrong. He bemoaned the fact that this team does not take care of the ball very well, and that's something that shows up in the season-long stats. I know the 20 turnovers was a season high for Utah State, but they've had games with 18, with 17. And the Aggies rank 230th in the country in their own turnover percentage. They force teams into tons of turnovers. They rank 6th in turnover percentage forced on their opponents, but they don't take care of the ball. And in Calhoun, he kind of compared him to last year's team, where he said last year's team took care of the ball, and the Aggies were just inside the top 100 in taking care of the ball. But this year, they do not take care of the ball. They're below average and trending in the wrong direction of late in taking care of the ball. So that's something that Coach Calhoun is worried about. But as I was kind of starting with that point, he said they're not going to moan and groan about getting a win. They got a win on the road in a place where 2 years ago when the Aggies won the Mountain West, they needed a last-second shot to send the game to overtime playing in Fresno against a worse Fresno team. And, and again, it was a Utah State team that won the Mountain West title that year. So Utah State gets a 9-point win. Was it pretty? No. Weirdly impressive in some ways, but definitely some things the Aggies need to shape up on, particularly in turnovers. Something I actually said in my preview on the Full Court Press before the game was, somebody pointed this out on Twitter where I somehow managed to be correct, where I said, the Aggies against this Fresno State defense, if they're on point, I said they could have scored 100. But then I kind of qualified saying, look, this is if they commit a bunch of turnovers, and that was something I looked at where Fresno State, they're in like the top 40. I think, well, where do they rank now after forcing that many turnovers on Utah State? They rank 27th in the country. I think they were 37th heading into that game against Utah State. But like, they were a team that's really good and are a team that's really good in forcing turnovers, much like the Aggies. And I noted that the Aggies were struggling in turnovers. So I said, hey, this is a game where they could end up committing a lot of turnovers. And I said that they can score 100 or they can score 72. Well, it turns out I was spot on with that second part. Is the Aggies score exactly 72 there. So if they can hone in those turnovers, then, as Coach Calhoun kind of pointed out, they'll probably shoot better from three. That's a correlation I need to go back and see. Like, does Utah State's high turnover games correlate with their low 3-point shooting games? I don't think entirely, because I think they had 8 turnovers in a game where they shot like 3 of 23 against Weber State. So I don't think it correlates perfectly. But just overall, having a good passing game is something that Coach Calhoun attributes to good shooting. So we'll see if the Aggies can figure that out. They got San Jose State next, so at home. So, they're worst teams to have at home to try and bounce back from an ugly game. But that's the recap of Fresno State. Let's move on to San Diego State. Speaking of San Jose, as that was the Aztecs' opponent. And they were on the road, so this game played in San Jose. And San Diego State, they're, with Wyoming, they're a team that I'm kind of still holding them down, like pulling them down because of preseason expectations. They're 10-3, but I'm like, well, but are they really that good? San Diego State's a team that I'm still propping up, despite what I kind of keep seeing on the court, where the offense is it is better than I thought it was going to be. This is probably one of the better San Diego State teams. I was looking at it the other day. We're like, this is one of the highest scoring teams they've ever had. They're averaging a hair under 82 points per game, which the last time they averaged 80 points per game, I'm trying to scroll down and then the page crashed. Trying to see when was the last time they averaged 80 a game. Yeah, 1984 was the last time they averaged 80 points per game on offense. But at the same time, they're giving up 72 points per game. And, their defensive rating is actually still pretty good. I don't want to go off raw points per game. I went on a rant about raw, utilizing offensive and defensive rating, as opposed to just raw points allowed and points scored per game. But that does kind of display hey, San Diego State has a better offense than they're used to having, but they also have a worse defense than they're used to having. Not that it's bad. It's not. It's top 50 in KenPom, but there's been some games where they're not as on point on defense, although their offense has been better. So it's I don't know. And overall, it feels like San Diego State's just taken a step back. They're 8-4. 3 of their losses are to teams that are top 30 in KenPom. And then there's the loss to Troy. So it's I don't want to give up on San Diego State, but I'm just kind of sitting here saying, look, San Diego State is one of the best teams in the conference, but I'm waiting to see it. Especially against, Mountain West teams, against good Mountain West teams. And in this game against San Jose was kind of another example of all right, San Diego State, go out and dominate the teams that you're supposed to be dominating. And it was kind of akin to last year where San Diego State could not dominate the teams that it should. They beat San Jose by exactly 3 points twice. They dang near should have lost both of those games. They barely escaped Air Force. I think there were some other games they were really close in. And so San Diego State just isn't dominating the way that I think we were expecting, and especially with the talent that they returned. They returned, they had a preseason player of the year. You got Reese Dixon Waters. I didn't get his name backwards, did I? I was suddenly doubting myself. You got Magoon Gwath, who was supposed to be taking this massive step forward. This is an NBA caliber player. And Magoon is averaging 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds. You know, their best player this season, BJ Davis, is coming off the bench. He shouldn't be your best player. It's nice that you have a guy like that stepping up. The Aztecs would probably be in some pretty bad places if they didn't have BJ Davis playing the way he is. Because Miles Bird certainly isn't stepping up. He's not player of the year. Reese Dixon-Waters, he was supposed to take a big step last year, but then he was injured, didn't play the entire year. He was supposed to kind of capitalize on that this year. He's not. 10.5 points is solid. Miles Bird, 9.3 points. You can do a lot worse. But those are guys that are supposed to be leading the offense and pushing things forward. And it's not just raw points per game. It's, efficiency. Dixon-Waters is shooting under 40%. Miles Bird is barely over 40%. It's like these guys need to be averaging a lot more, not so much averaging a lot more points, they need to be shooting better. So I'm just sitting here waiting for San Diego State to finally be San Diego State. And mind you, in this game against San Jose, you kind of had them turn into that, where they waited, and then they were the San Diego State team that we're used to seeing. Because with 5 minutes to play, it was a 2-point game. Colby Garland, who, by the way, is basically trying to put San Jose on his back and carry them. He had 30 points in this one. He did need 21 shots to get there. He was 2 of 11 from 3. But he got to the free throw line a ton, was causing problems in that area. But Colby Garland got it within 2 with a pair of free throws, 61-59. And I was following the game flow at this point. I was like, dang, why is it so close between San Diego and San Jose? I wasn't able to watch it because I was in the thick of watching the Aggies Bulldogs game. But from that point, in the last 5 minutes, 25 seconds, San Diego State outscores San Jose by 11, which is the kind of domination that we're supposed to be getting from San Diego State. And it's what we saw all of last year, where they'd let teams hang around and then they'd make the clutch buckets. So San Diego State was incredibly clutch last year, despite getting themselves into the stupidest of situations. But you want to see San Diego State be San Diego State for the entire game, because we've seen them be it for part of the game. Like, they were neck and neck with Arizona for an entire half. And in the second half, they were terrible. And, they got blown out by Arizona. They were really good for the final 5 minutes of this game against San Jose. But the rest of the game, they were, or at least some of the rest of the game, they were pulling ahead in the first half, and they just let San Jose come back. This game was close for a lot of the second half until San Diego State pulled away. So I just want to see San Diego State really be themselves, improve on defense, and then just kind of maintain what they have on offense and just shoot a little bit more efficiently. Get a little bit more out of Magoon Guath. Have him take the bigger step forward on offense that we were hoping we would see. Have Reese Dixon-Waters, have Miles Bird, have them shoot better. Overall, you can't have them shooting 40% from the field. And if you keep getting what you have from BJ Davis, this is a San Diego State team that could very well still win the Mountain West. They just need to go out there and prove it. Let's move on to Nevada and Colorado State. And I'm kind of fearing a big drop-off with Colorado State, and there's kind of two fronts to it. One is obviously Kyle Jorgensen's out. Not out for the season, if I read the report right. But I may have to double-check that because I didn't double-check before. Well, the initial thing I'd heard is he wasn't going to be out for the season. So someone can correct me if I'm wrong there. But not only is Kyle Jorgensen out, and you're also missing Rashawn Mbemba. So that front court for Colorado State is paper thin. It's basically Kerry Booth, and that's it. And Booth is a good player. He goes out there and gets 10 rebounds. He scores 7 points, which is lower than kind of what he should. He got 6 blocks. If the man manages to bulk up a little bit, he's someone who could be a really good lob threat, rebounding, and even rim protecting center. But he's basically all they have. You got Nikola Giappa. I can't remember if I'm saying his name right. You get 14 minutes out of him, and not terrible. But, like, you're missing two key pieces of that front court. And Kyle Jorgensen, his offense, especially in the paint, where he was so effective in post-ups and then pick and roll, and also as a pick and pop guy. So, like, they're definitely missing that. And I don't want to, like, understate the impact of not having Kyle Jorgensen. But I also kind of wondered with Colorado State, like, were they a team that was just shooting out of their minds and was set for a fall back to earth? Because they were shooting, league leading or NCAA leading in field goal percentage. And, like, somebody does have to lead the NCAA in field goal percentage, but, like, I just didn't believe that Colorado State was going to continue shooting like 55% from the field, that they were going to continue to shoot like 45% from three. They had like 4 or 5 guys, heading into the Utah State game. Now, when I was doing my prep there, I think they had, it might have been 6 guys that were shooting like above 43% from three. Like, if you shoot 43% on decent volume, you're like a high-level three-point shooter. And Colorado State had like 6 of those guys. They had 2 guys shooting above 50%, 2 or 3 guys. And I didn't really see that being able to continue. Like, you're not going to have that many guys continue to shoot that well from three. So I was kind of thinking, is Colorado State going to start falling off because they're not going to keep shooting that well from three? And now we have 2 games from Colorado State where they've just shot terrible. And my web browser decided to freeze, so I don't have the stats and the exact stats in front of my eyes. But they shot season lows basically across the board, except for, I guess, free throws. But their three-point percentage against the Aggies was terrible. Their field goal percentage against the Aggies was terrible. And then they had a chance to follow that up at home. And I thought they would. Colorado State last year was a way better team at home than they were on the road. I know it's an entirely new team, so I don't want to ascribe last year's trends onto this year's Colorado State team, though they obviously do have a few returners. But at home, you have some time off to go over what went wrong and then try and bounce back from that. Well, at home, they shoot 37% overall and 25% from three. And then 62% on free throws, which I think is a season low for them. So you look at the first 11 games. I'm going to use Basketball Reference and do the math here. Their first 11 games, they shot 54% from the field and 45% from three. In their last 2 games, they've shot 37% overall and 28% from three. So they've gone from averaging literally best in the country. Heading into that Utah State game, they were number 1 in the country in field goal percentage and number 1 in three-point percentage, and I think they were top 10 in free throw percentage. And over the last couple of games, they've had their 2 worst shooting games overall in from three. And then also one of their worst performances of the free throw line. So is this kind of the beginning of the downfall for Colorado State? Like, again, going into that Utah State game, I was looking at Colorado State saying, hey, look, this is one of the contenders. Like, it was Utah State and Colorado State. Those are your 2. New Mexico was kind of jumping in there as they were having a fantastic start to the season, beat some really good teams and only had like 1 iffy loss. But really, it was Utah State and Colorado State. I had them as my 1 and 2. But now Colorado State is tumbling fast. And unless they get back to shooting the absurd percentages they were shooting earlier in the season, I don't know if they can rebound from that. especially with the injuries they're facing with Jorgensen and Bemba. If they get one or both of those guys back in the near future, they should be able to rebound. And they're probably going to pick up too many losses to be looking at large NCAA tournament. But maybe they could have something similar to last year, where the team they were at the end of last year was NCAA tournament caliber, even if they weren't in the early season. So maybe we can see a repeat, albeit with a different flavor, what we got from last year's Colorado State team. But to give Nevada their props, I know I've been going on and on about Colorado State. Nevada is, becoming more and more intriguing by the game. You've got some good play from some of their players. Chuck Bailey having a pretty solid season. I think Nevada might actually be the one team that I haven't actually watched a game of. For one reason or another, I've tried to catch as much, whenever I have the chance. But off the top of my head, I don't know if I've actually managed to catch a Nevada game live. I've seen highlights and things like that, but I need to get my eyes on Nevada, because the box score watching is never enough. But several of the guys they have on this team are performing well, and they've got a solid record, same as Wyoming. They're not getting the respect in the rankings. They're not getting that from me so far. Heck, like I said, I haven't even watched them yet. It's my deficiency in covering the Mountain West so far. But we'll see if they end up being one of the teams that can contend. I think my power ranking that I had of them yesterday is like I had them in the tier of they're going to cause some problems for teams at the top, but I don't think they're going to contend. But, you get a win over Colorado State. Like, that's, in doing so on the road, that's the kind of attention-grabbing win. I know Colorado State's kind of walking wounded right now, but that's the kind of win that can start to propel them up the ladder. And if they can continue playing well, they're playing well on offense. They're not as good as you'd like on defense. They're just inside the top 100 on defense, according to KenPom, 91st. So they have some improvements there. They're not going to shut down too many teams on defense, but they will do it occasionally, like they did to Colorado State. Like, they're not incapable of shutting teams down. They're just not going to do it as often as you'd like to see. But then they're going to put up some good points. They got a few guys that can put up points. So Nevada is kind of the new team to keep an eye on, where Colorado State and New Mexico were the teams that I was starting to really keep an eye on outside of Utah State as the favorite. Nevada is now kind of stepping into that role, where I'm keeping an eye on them as potentially the new team to rise into the contenders club, where Colorado State is kind of falling out of that. But speaking of jumping into the contenders club, I had in my again the power rankings I had the other day was Utah State, Colorado State, and New Mexico, I think, in the contenders club, if I remember correctly. And Colorado State probably falls out of that, but the next tier I had was Boise State and San Diego State, where it's like they're a very short jump away from jumping into that contenders club. And Boise State is a team that's been a little moody this year. Obviously, they have that loss to Hawaii Pacific that a lot of people are holding over Boise's head, I think, unnecessarily. I think that's people are being too harsh by continuing to point that out, because I don't ever want to judge a team based off of this one game. And yeah, that was an awful loss. Like, that's one of Boise's probably worst losses ever. But they follow that up by beating the tar out of Utah Valley, who's a good team, top 100 in KenPom. They beat Wichita State. They have a road win over Butler. Got a neutral site. It's still in the state of Idaho. They got a win over St. Mary's. It was kind of ugly at the end, but they got the win over St. Mary's. And then they got a win over New Mexico, who was a team that I think I had them at number 2 in my power rankings. So New Mexico, and they took control of that game in the second half. Boise fell behind New Mexico at various times in this game. And for instance, they were down by 11. New Mexico started off the second half on an 11-0 run, where they led by 11. It was an 11-0 run. New Mexico led by 11 with 17 minutes to go in the game. And this was about the time where I was able to turn over to this game after finishing my coverage of the Utah State Fresno game. It was right when New Mexico was taking control, and then Boise starts slowly taking it back. And the game it got pretty ugly. There were a lot of free throws. Like this game was, I was sitting there watching with my brother, and it was like, can they please stop calling every tiny ounce of contact is a foul? There were just so many free throws. And also both teams couldn't stop missing free throws. There were 15 combined free throws missed, I believe, when I did the math yesterday. Boise goes 16 of 25 at the line, and New Mexico goes 10 of 16. So just not very good at the free throw line. And to be honest, both teams shot horribly too. New Mexico shoots 30% overall, 12% from three. Boise fares a little better. They were 36% overall, 20% from three. But Boise made the plays they needed to at the end. Their defense continues to be suffocating. They have one of the better defenses in the Mountain West. Of course, New Mexico has one of the better defenses in the Mountain West. But Boise, according to KenPom, literally has the best defense in the Mountain West, 20th in the nation, according to KenPom. Utah State slightly behind there at 29th. And then in New Mexico, they're at 40th, where they're the third best defense in the Mountain West, according to KenPom. So good defensive battle, but kind of lacking on offense from both sides. And that's kind of the weakness of both Boise and New Mexico, is they have really good defense. In Boise's case, elite defense, but they struggle on offense a little bit. They can be a little bit too moody in their offense. So that's what we got with this home game against Boise, with them getting that 9-point win over New Mexico. So, and it was a really good bounce back for Boise, who lost to Nevada. I mentioned Nevada. They've got wins over Colorado State and Boise State to start Mountain West play, and double-digit wins over Boise and over Colorado State to start Mountain West play. So that's another reason to be keeping an eye on Nevada. But it was a good bounce back for Boise State. And well, again, that's another team where it's like they get that win. Does that push them into Contenders Club? Probably. We're going to get a really good look at Boise on Saturday to maybe kind of affirm getting that win over New Mexico. The Broncos have to go to San Diego State. So I think that'll be the game of the day in the Mountain West, because Utah State's playing San Jose, Nevada's playing Fresno, Grand Canyon, Colorado State. That'll be an interesting one to see if Colorado State can bounce back. It's also Grand Canyon's first Mountain West action since getting that 12-point win at Wyoming. It was an impressive start for them. We do get UNLV back in action there, one of the teams that didn't play on the 5-game slate. And then, I think that's pretty much your one marquee game of that Saturday slate is going to be Boise at San Diego State. So that'll be a game to look forward to. Of course, I still got to make sure I'm following Utah State against Fresno State. So I'll see how much of these games I'm able to catch. I should be able to, because Utah State plays San Jose at home, and Boise at 4 p.m. And then, or I think that's 4 p.m. Eastern time. So I think that's 2 p.m. local. And then Boise State, San Diego State's the nightcap. So should be able to catch all of that game, and I'll see if I can catch Nevada too. They're playing they tip off 3 hours after the Aggies do. So I'll try and do my best to make sure I catch a Nevada game. As again, they're probably my new team to watch here. Them and Boise State are climbing into that top 3. Utah State obviously stays there because of their win over Fresno State. So that's probably your top 3 is Utah State. I'd say Utah State, Nevada, and Boise State are probably my new top 3. Then I don't know exactly where I'd be splitting the hairs, but New Mexico, San Diego State are probably the next 2. Colorado State, falling pretty fast. They probably fall behind New Mexico and San Diego State because of their current form. we'll have to see what Colorado State brings. But that's going to wrap up my recap of last night's games in the Mountain West. I'll be posting this on the 1069 The Fans YouTube page. I'll probably post it on my own Twitter as well. And then also this is on audio on our podcast feed, 1069thefan.com, the 1069 The Fan mobile app, and basically wherever you get your podcast. That's our the Full Court Press podcast feed. Thank you so much for watching, listening, however you've been following me today. Have a happy New Year, everyone.